important to remain together. We need to have sources of collaboration, and the whole is more than the sum of its parts. And these collaboration networks have led us to understanding that we need to strengthen the training processes of healthcare professionals. Let me greet Dr. Melissa Islas, representing the National University School of Medicine. My greetings, Melissa. Feel free to have the floor right now. We would like to thank the School of Medicine for its support, and you have the floor now.
Hola, buenos días, muchas gracias.
Hello, good morning. Many thanks.
Esta sesión de 14 conversatorios
We're about to start this session of 14 conversations of the knowledge that are part of the Knowledge and Transformation Forum. Many thanks to all of you. Helen, it's so good to see you here. Luis already said this, but I would like to highlight the role of the General Medical Council, GMC. GMCSI has played a fundamental role. Helen, thanks for your patience and support. You have the floor so that we can introduce you, or you can introduce yourself.
Thank you so much, and hello everybody. It's really nice to see you again. I'm Helen Featherstone, the General Manager of GMC Services International, and we've been working together with the Better Health Program business partners in Mexico, and I'm looking forward to an interesting and engaging session today. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, Helen. Y para poder iniciar...
Many thanks, Helen. To be able to formally start this session, we have asked one of our partners in this project, Dr. Adolfo Chavez, who heads CONAMEJE. He's going to formally launch this session. I would like to take this opportunity to thank Dr. Adolfo Chavez for his support all along the program and what is coming. Thank you for your support, your solidarity, your commitment to the project. Thank you very much. You have the floor now. Many thanks. I would like to thank particularly Luis Fernando Barraza and Alejandro Sanders. Thank you for inviting me to actively participate in the Knowledge and Transformation Health Forum, focusing on health and education, the future that we need to shape. I would also want to thank all participants. We've met many of them. I want to thank especially Helen, who participated with us recently, telling us very clearly what is it that together Mexico and the UK can build in the future in the field of primary healthcare. I would like to ask for your approval to formally open this course as soon as you let me know that I can do so, because we know that we have a very busy agenda, not too much time. We have a lot to say and learn. So as soon as you let me know, I will briefly formally open up the session and welcome all of you. Many thanks. Go ahead. Thanks for accepting our invitation to formally open this session. Thank you. It's a true honor for me to have been selected to formally launch the academic activities that will be held in these 2 days, including national and international organizations that are worldwide renowned. I would like to thank this collaboration between the UK and Mexico through the Better Health Program and the Embassy of the United Kingdom. Without further ado, and at 8 minutes past 11 a.m. Mexico City time, on October 27 of 2021, it's an honor for me to formally open the second Knowledge and Transformation Health Forum held in 2021 under the name Health and Education, the future that we need to shape. We wish you from the bottom of our hearts a great success as the success you had a year ago. We hope that it will be developed successfully and that it will have a great impact on health, because this is our goal. Thank you for your participation in this forum to everyone. Many thanks, Dr. Chavez. We give you a virtual round of applause. Thank you very much. thanks to everyone and those who are following us via Zoom. Please feel free to send us your questions through the Q&A chat. And those who following us through YouTube, we will also receive your written comments. I want to thank the participation of AMSA, who is sponsoring the interpretation today, and thanks to our interpreters for building these communication bridges. Luis Fernando, we can get started with the academic session. Please support us introducing your UK colleagues. Go ahead, Luis. Of course, Alejandro, many thanks. Before giving the floor and the screen to our colleagues from Imperial College London, let me remind you that at the bottom of your screen, you can see a globe that says interpretation. If you click there, you can select to listen either Spanish or English. English, Spanish, or if you are bilingual, you can simply disable that. Do as you wish. I would now like to give the floor to Dr. Sonia Kumar and Dr. Ravi Parekh from Imperial College London, who will begin this session.
So thank you so much for having us back to come and speak to you today. So really a big thank you from us and a good evening from London and a good morning to everyone in Mexico. I'm a professor of medical education at Imperial College London and the director of Medic, and I'm really pleased to be joined today by Dr. Ravi Parekh, who's a practicing GP and the deputy director of Medic. And we're going to be talking to you today about competency-based curricula. Ravi, next slide. So just a quick overview of our 15-minute presentation this morning, of why is it important to have a primary healthcare competency-based curriculum? How can you implement it safely and successfully? What are the challenges that you might come across? And how can you overcome some of these challenges? Next slide. So before we begin, I thought it was important just to remind ourselves of why it's important, or what is the purpose of a medical education system? What's the purpose of a medical school? I think we're all agreed it's to prepare our doctors, our future doctors, to provide safe, effective, holistic and compassionate patient care. And a definition that I know we've mentioned a few times, and we will mention a few times more over the next few weeks, is the WHO statement from 1995 on social accountability, where medical schools, it was stated, have an obligation to direct their education, research and service activities towards addressing the priority health concerns of their communities they have a mandate to serve. So what does this mean for us? Next slide. So what are the priority health concerns of our populations? Well, things that we have in common are we have an aging population, and what goes along with that is increasing chronic diseases and multimorbidity. We've mentioned COVID a number of times in these forums, but we've now got a new condition, long COVID, mental health problems. We're seeing big increases of those in the UK, mainly from social isolation and the stress of going through the pandemic. And we're also seeing widening health inequalities. And you can see this infographic on the right here from the WHO, which shows that a lot of our health inequalities are down to the social determinants of health, where you live, how much alcohol you drink, smoking, air pollution. We're in the midst of a digital revolution, but are we at risk of being left behind? Are our students at risk of being left behind? And our doctors, are we all fully trained in keeping up to date with digital health technologies? And more importantly, are our patients able to keep up to date and fully appraise the digital health technologies that they're being exposed to? And the last, of course, is stretched resources, something that both in education and health, we're all having to cope with. Next slide. So the big question then for all of us is to examine what types of doctors do we need to meet some of these needs? What type of knowledge, skills and values? We need generalists. We need doctors who can understand the broad breadth of medicine. We need holistic practitioners going beyond the scientific basis of disease to understanding the full biopsychosocial model. Doctors who can manage complexity and uncertainty, and doctors who are digitally competent themselves, but more than that, can support their patients in using digital technologies. We need doctors who can work and respect multi-professional teams. They're able to lead and manage teams with scarce resources, and they're adaptable and flexible, as we have all seen, because our world is uncertain and extremely volatile. And probably most importantly, I think, are our professional values. We need doctors who are compassionate, who are ethical, who understand the value of diversity and inclusion, and understand their own limitations and have an ability to care for themselves, but also to care for each other. Next slide. In 2018, the GMC released the outcomes for graduates, and you can see here, this is where competencies are applied under each of these headings, the knowledge, skills, and values that our future doctors need. And you can see some of the words that I've mentioned highlighted here: health promotion, psychological principles, using information safely and effectively, complexity and uncertainty. And we're going to build on this competency framework in just a few minutes. And next slide. So really, this is my last slide before I hand over to Ravi. And this is more of a question for the audience. How does this relate to you and your medical school? A question for your institution, your faculty, community partners, patients, and your students. What is your unique medical school vision? What are your local population health and social care needs? What types of doctors do you need to meet these needs? And with all bearing that all in mind, what are the key competencies you want your medical graduates to leave with? And with that, I'm going to hand over to Ravi.
Thank you, Sonia. So I'm going to just talk a little bit, first of all, about what a competency-based curriculum is and what the key benefits of one can be. So a competency-based curriculum is one that is based on defined, clear outcomes. So we mean the knowledge, the skills, the values, the attributes that Sonia was just referring to. And the benefits of this is it can be aligned to the needs and priorities of the local population to which you're serving. It emphasizes these key skills and values and abilities in our students, rather than focusing on knowledge acquisition on its own. And therefore it de-emphasizes the time within which they're based within training, which is often how traditional medical curriculum were designed. And to do this, we need to really promote a learner-centered approach for our students. And we do that through the use of active and service learning strategies, which I'll come on to in a bit more detail in a second, and align that with frequent, programmatic, and meaningful assessments. So just going back to that picture that Sonia showed you earlier from the GMC, what are the key competencies that need to be included within a medical school curriculum? So that picture is really describing the UK competencies and priorities. But if we compare that to the curriculum review documentation from UNAM, you can see some real overlap here with some of the key areas that apply to both contexts. So particularly areas like communication, the use of a biopsychosocial approach, the importance of ethics and population health, and complexity and uncertainty and decision-making in a challenging time is really important in both contexts here. So I've just spelled out the definition there of what it is. How do you actually implement a competency-based curriculum? And I've split this into three key areas. First of all, deciding what the competencies are. Secondly, how do you actually implement it? And finally, how do we support our students as they progress through the curriculum? So starting with the first, which is deciding what the competencies are, and often this is the most challenging and difficult aspect of the whole thing. You can do this by looking at it from two different levels and starting from a very broad perspective, looking at things like global priorities. What are the national policy papers or drivers or key health strategies that are affecting your own country and area? And you can then narrow that right down to the local population needs. And to do that, you need to think about how we're going to involve our community stakeholders and our students as well in all of the stages of the development of those competencies. Once you've developed those key competencies that you want your students to achieve, how are we actually going to implement them? Well, this requires a real shift in our teaching practices. And it's moving away from purely focusing on the content of the placement or the length of the placement, but thinking much more broadly, where is the actual learning happening and how is it happening? And it reflects back to some of the things we talked about in the last knowledge forum, the use of active and service learning. And those are things which involve authentic experiences for our students, where they deal with patients with their real life problems and therefore learn those competencies and demonstrate those competencies as they progress. And you can do so in a spiral curriculum, which means you're revisiting those competencies in increasing difficulty as you progress through the curriculum. But really, it can be very difficult to implement such a curriculum if you're not aligning it with the assessments. And that requires a real shift in our traditional assessment strategies from what are normally very high stakes end of year or end of program assessments to much more programmatic, continuous and much more meaningful work-based assessments, which I'll visit again in a second. And in the context of COVID, how can we make sure that we can use and utilize digital approaches, things like hybrid consultations, video, telephone consultations, to ensure that our students continue with these active learning strategies in these difficult times? And finally, how do we support our students? And this is really important for me, the need to have longitudinal and meaningful student supervision. So someone who you get to know throughout your whole journey throughout the medical curriculum. They get to know who you are, what your strengths are, what your areas of weaknesses might be, and work with you in trying to address them so that you can achieve the competencies at the end of the curriculum. And using approaches like coaching are really important to ensure that we provide strong pastoral support, which goes hand in hand with academic support as well. So we talked about how we can develop and implement the competency-based curriculum. But once you've done so, we need to ensure that it's actually successful. And what I've got here is a diagram from Kirkpatrick's hierarchy of evaluation, which I think is a really useful framework to have in mind when you're thinking about evaluating your own curricula. And I think far too often we are leaving our evaluation at the lower levels of this pyramid, looking purely at things like learner satisfaction or reaction, and we're looking superficially at things like modification of attitudes in a shorter time period. But what we need to do perhaps is move right the way up this pyramid to the aspiration of changing patient care, seeing the benefits in our patients who are ultimately the people we're here to help, and thinking about our organisation and the culture of our organisation and the professional behaviour that we're seeing within our students as they progress through the curriculum. So we've talked about how you develop it, how you implement it, and how you might assess it. But what are the challenges? Well, there are many challenges, and I've just grouped together some key ones here that exist from experience and also that exist in the literature. The first set are really deemed around the problem around competencies themselves. Some would argue that the word competency means that once you've achieved it, there is very little room to then go on and learn further. And there is a real criticism that there is no space for this continual learning, which we know is so important in medical education as you become a practicing clinician. There is a risk that once you've developed your competencies, are we making medicine just a series of tick box exercises that the students need to jump through? And how can we balance this with the art of medicine? And what I mean by that is really the interesting bit of medicine that we all see when we're practicing with our patients, the uncertainty, the challenges, the complexity that we see with our patients. And that has led to some people to shift to using the word capabilities rather than competencies. And that's because capabilities suggest that there is always room to progress, to learn more. And you can use your capabilities and apply them in more authentic, uncertain, complex environments that we know our students will be entering once they graduate as doctors. It's really important to think about how we're assessing our competencies and moving away from often the stable, simulated environments that we test our students in, such as ostomy stations with actors. How can we make that much more authentic and realistic? reflecting what they're seeing in clinical practice during their placements. And then finally, I think a really important one, which is how can we actually integrate a really truly competency-based curriculum, unfortunately within a fixed time envelope that we all have to base within our own institutions. And balancing those two things is a real challenge. So what are the suggestions that we can provide you with how to overcome some of those solutions? And we group them into 3 areas. First of all, focusing on the curriculum, focusing on those critiques of the tick box exercise, the idea that there is only, once you develop a competency, there's no room for further improvement. Well, I think there's a real need to engage with those key stakeholders that Sonia was talking about earlier. Understand what the needs are for a local population and involve them throughout the whole process. Think about service learning, so learning through the development and delivery of service with our patients to ensure that that learning is authentic. Involve our multi-professional colleagues and interdisciplinary learning, again, reflecting what's the reality of clinical practice that we see day to day. Making sure you have that meaningful longitudinal supervision with your students all the way through, providing them with regular feedback on their performance. And having space in the curriculum, which is always so difficult to do within such a packed medical curriculum, for the students to reflect, discuss, and critique their performance. And ultimately for me, this is about moving away from students thinking about assessment-driven learning, where they're just doing it for the sake of passing their exams, to stimulating curiosity in our students. They want to go out and learn because it's beneficial for their patients in the future. We need to make sure we measure success in a robust and evidence-based approach, which I talked about earlier. And finally, thinking about assessment. So how can we test an authentic setting, moving away from those high stakes, much more simulated settings, involving our multi-professional colleagues and peers, and thinking about work-based assessments, things like case-based discussions, patient satisfaction questionnaires, and multi-source feedback as possible options for implementing a programmatic assessment strategy. I'll finish there, and thank you very much for listening, and of course we welcome any comments or questions.
Muchas gracias, Ravi. Muchas gracias, Sonia, por su
Many thanks, Ravi and Sonia, for this wonderful presentation. We will have the chance for entertaining your questions. In the meantime, please feel free to write down your concerns, your questions, and send them over through the Q&A chat. Once again, I thank all those who are participating with us via YouTube or Zoom. I'm being told that the YouTube transmission was broken up, but it has been restored. And I would like to remind you that we have a simultaneous interpretation available. I would now like to give the floor to Dr. Carlos Saavedra, representing Universidad Nacional Mayor of San Marcos from Peru, San Marcos University from Peru. Thank you, Dr. Saavedra, for participating. Thank you for logging in from Peru to this session. I would also like to greet Dr. Simitrio Rojas, who has joined us. We can see him. Dr. Carlos Saavedra, greetings all the way to Peru, and you have the floor. Many thanks. It's a pleasure to participate with you. It's a pleasure. Allow me to share my screen, please. Please tell me if you are seeing my screen.
La vemos con las diapositivas desarrolladas.
We can see your screen. Please click on full screen. At the bottom of your screen on the right-hand side, you click on presentation mode. It's a small icon that shows sort of a blackboard.
Doctor, ¿nos escucha?
Sí, sí, le escucho. Si no,
Ah,
con presentación.
perfecto.
No veo el icono este.
Doctor, si presiona F5.
F5. Ahora sí, perfecto, gracias. Ahora
No
sí,
estamos
creo que
viendo ahora.
Click on F5 so that you can switch to full screen.
¿me escuchan bien?
Can you all hear me? Asks Dr. Simitrio, Dr. Saavedra.
Doctor, confirmar si usted nos escucha.
Sí, yo sí les escucho bien. Yo sí les escucho. ¿Me escuchan bien? ¿Me escuchan adecuado?
He's asking if we can hear him.
Yo les escucho bien.
We're saying yes.
Sí, doctor, lo escuchamos bien. Sí, también escucho bien. Gracias.
¿Y la pantalla adecuadamente?
Se ve su
¿Todavía?
pantalla, doctor, pero
Sí.
pareciera que
They're
está
telling him how to switch to full.
congelada, porque se ve
Ahora.
todavía en la barra izquierda las diapositivas. Y no sé si pueda a lo mejor dejar de compartir y volver a compartir a ver si ya se descongela. Al menos yo la veo congelada.
Ok, voy a dejar de compartir. Ahora se está viendo
Ahí ya
mejor.
ahí ya la vemos completa y en una...
We see your full screen. That's not your first slide, but we can see your full screen under presentation mode. It's there. Great. You can go ahead. Good morning, everyone. Greetings from Peru. I was asked to tell you what is our experience at San Marcos National University regarding the competence-based training. Let me begin by quoting this very well-known and classical document that speaks or says that education is facing multiple changes, economic, technological, political ones, and that this definitely changes the definition of the curriculum, always promoting our goals like peace, democracy, and social justice. This is a very well-known document, an old one, that mentions the tension that exists between what is a global and local, universal and singular, tradition and modernity. And we have to shift these paradigms and face these challenges between what is long-lasting and short-term things, the tension between the essential competency and concern over equal opportunities for all. This leads us to multiple reflections and considering four pillars. First of all, learning to know, to do, to live, and to be. That is to say, to know, to do, and to live, to be and to live. This is another quite old document as well that speaks about a changing society in which demands tend to be constantly reformulated, as is the present time. So generic competencies are very important, and competency-based teaching is a dynamic and perfectible reference point, but it provides many advantages to education. We need to identify professional and academic profiles, manage the student-centered knowledge, respond to growing demands and needs of society, to have an educational proposal that is flexible, and this contributes to the search for more employment and citizenship, and promotes the construction and consolidation of an educational space in Latin America and the Caribbean. The design of these plans will obviously benefit education institutions, the teachers, because they will constantly be able to develop themselves. It will benefit the students with lifelong learning. It will benefit society because its demands will be met. It will give us a comprehensive education system that is another important benefit. And of course, the employers and healthcare providers, because they will have the professionals with the desired professional profile. So our experience began with the University Act, which was a new one. It was published in 2014. It was based on all of these norms and had 4 pillars. It was promulgated on July 9 of 2014. It represented a change in the perspective of universities with ongoing improvement of education quality, with licensing of university healthcare institutions and education institutions, and the supervision of the educational model. So San Marcos University in 2016 established its new university bylaws that included the changes in the law. That same law included inside or implemented within the country the National System for Higher Education, SUNEDU, and the National System for Educational Accreditation, SINEACE. So these are two bodies leading to our university going through licensing process. Then the School of Medicine also had to go through another licensing process in what was considered as the accreditation of the medical school. Then this new University Act required that we included overall studies as part of our medical education. So we created a new educational model that was based on knowing, being, living together, and learning how to do. And this educational model has its own axes that include long-term learning, comprehensive training based on competencies, ethics, research, educational innovation, university social responsibility, interculturality, and it should be transdisciplinary with an educational culture. And these are the components of the new educational model that include assessment, a curriculum for comprehensive training, academic quality, the profile of graduates, the teaching, managing knowledge, research, to the availability of tutors and the solidarity of learning and service, contextualization of the training. This led us to, within our medical school, propose a project of ongoing improvement. And these are the various stages that we went through. We began with stage 1 with information. The information stage consisted of data collection, first of all, to determine what are the health demands of our population at the regional, national, at the international level, and within the Americas as well. We had to define the profile of the graduates so that they could respond to these health demands. We collected the information from various universities. Later, we went to the second part of this stage, which was a conference of healthcare providers. Healthcare providers from throughout the country gathered and they came to tell us what was the profile of the graduates that they required in order to meet their demands. With this information, the group of professors visited 4 universities and they analyzed the information that was collected from healthcare providers as well. They tried to see how this kind of education was taking place at other universities abroad. With all of this information, we went to stage 2, which was proposing the curriculum for the medical school so that it could respond to health demands. We defined the profile of the graduates, the profile of the professors, the curriculum itself, and then we validated the curriculum within the university, basically, with validation workshops with the technical staff. This is what happened during this first stage. First of all, information collection in stage 1. This led to creating groups of teachers and students. We located key opinion leader teachers that were part of a group with with students. We had three groups. One that analyzed the health demands. The second group discussed the professional profile of various universities, and a third group considered the curricula that responded to the profile of the graduate. At the second stage, we received all the information from healthcare providers, in this case, the Ministry of Health and Social Security in the country. There were international conferences from Argentina and Brazil that shared with us their curriculum. And finally, Pan American Health Organization and the role of universities. With all of this information that we collected, we went to the third stage, that was visiting universities abroad. These are the three work groups about health demands, the profile of the graduates, etc. And so teamwork was begun. They started by addressing major problems. First of all, we realized that our curricula were damage-based, and students were trained at hospitals looking at very advanced diseases. There was not a risk-based approach. And we realize that we are making very late diagnosis leading to all of these damages, which is what the students saw. So this was the first observation that leading to changing our teaching process. From a student that practices at a hospital and learns about very advanced or very specialized diseases, versus training them at the primary healthcare level so that they could see how what's the status of most of the patients presenting at the primary healthcare centers. We had to change our accreditation system. We saw that we required comprehensive training with social responsibility, learning, and teaching and research. We realized that we required logistical support of the institution with a graduate profile responding to the society's demands, and we required the feedback during the planning of education, management of the graduate profile, and quality assurance. All of this had to respond to the stakeholders, that would be the community and the population health problems. Then we proceeded to the workshops with participation of multiple institutions, and we collected valuable information. This is a cartoon showing on the left-hand side universities going in one direction and healthcare institutions requiring their graduates are going in a different direction. So these are the different problems that we detected. Graduates did not meeting the needs of the country, a curriculum that was hospital-based, a focus on damage and no prevention, little primary health care, little community care, teaching system having the teachers as the major players, a knowledge gap regarding basic and clinical knowledge, an assessment system based on knowledge achievements, reduced clinical fields, little training on simulation scenarios, and little social responsibility. So these are the four gaps that we identified. We saw that the graduate needed to respond to the epidemiological profile of Peru. We had knowledge gap. We had to have student-based teaching and competency-based assessment. Of course, that we also discussed human development values here. We visited multiple universities in Washington, UNAM in Mexico, Columbia, Minnesota, Miami, Harvard, Campinas University, and Chile. We learned something from each one of them. These are pictures of our visits to various universities. Both teachers and students visited these universities. We obtained information about the flexibility, interdisciplinarity, internationalization, and student autonomy. These are the lessons learned from Columbia University. They have a key element, which is student autonomy. They have flexibility for students. They have 20% flexibility in their credits. At Washington University, they have a strong preventive component based on family medicine, comprehensive teaching, and they provide human resources to 5 states in the northern part of the United States. This is a community-based system. UNAM in Mexico City has this stepwise or tier-based program, getting to the fourth phase, which is social service. They have a reduced number of classrooms, 2 to 3 teachers responsible for the entire course. They have a very important simulation center that we considered as an example, and this is something that we learned from them. At Minnesota University, we were amazed by their doctorology system. So from the time a student enters into the first year of college, they are asked to think as physicians and act as physicians. Then Campinas University is a very young university that provided us with important information. They designed their curriculum based on a very important integration system that included basic clinical and clinical surgical training. All of this led to comprehensive training. These and many other experiences are what we learned from foreign universities. Then we turned to the second stage with the work groups that I mentioned before. The groups including students and teachers that would get together to present a proposal. They held workshops and prepared a proposal as to what should be the profile of the graduate. Then we went to stage number 3 that consisted of validation and assessment of those proposals. During the third stage, we worked with the same academic departments. We had participation of top leaders of the universities, the head of the Curriculum Assessment Commission, heads of professional schools, directors of academic departments, and different stakeholders like teachers, students, the administrative staff, and others. At San Marcos University School of Medicine, we have medical school, we have a medical technology school, nutrition school, the obstetrics school, and the nursing school. We have a total of 5 schools that are part of our medical school. So all of them were included, participated or were included in the preparation of this curriculum. Multiple workshops were held in a democratic work, trying for everyone to participate. We sort of weaved the fabric. That's we are showing how we weave the competencies as if we were weaving a fabric. We included overall competencies with leadership, teamwork, oral and written communication. These are overall competencies and ethical reasoning. These are specific competencies for the 5 schools: health sciences, public health, service management, social responsibility, and citizenship. And then we decided what were the competencies for the medical school. These pertain to medical school. They included comprehensive care and emergencies and disasters. So these were the competencies that we had for medical school, healthcare, and medical emergencies. Then we proceeded to preparing the curriculum itself with the basic of the curriculum shown here, the basics for the career, the different trends of the contest, the profile of the career or of the curriculum, general competencies, specific and specialty competencies, the articulation, vertical, horizontal, and integrating courses, then the plan by curriculum areas and the what we call the curricular mesh. In 2018, after 2 years of work, we prepared our curriculums. The bylaws were issued in 2016, and we started working at that time. So we already have the 5 curriculum for the nursing school, obstetric school, medical technology school, and nutrition. We created a multidisciplinary team, And at some point, all of these curriculums can get together so that we can have multidisciplinary teams. We are at the stage of implementing our curriculum. We are enhancing many of the classrooms because competencies included small groups of students. We implemented or established several labs. This is one of the hospital training sites. These are the different areas for small group discussions. This is an example of the labs that we have at the institutes. We purchased new simulators for postgraduate students, different types of them, for cardiology, echocardiography, a simulator of arthroscopy, and many others. So we started to train first the teachers and then the students. Of course, that simulators do not replace what we can learn clinically. Then we started preparing the educational material, considering the virtual classroom, having video technical classes. And we started, first of all, training the teachers in order to determine or to apply the idea of this new approach. First of all, we said we need to teach them that they know how to, that they can show that they can, and that they can do. We begin with overall studies, basic sciences, professional studies, professional practices, and the profile of the graduate. So these are the different stages of the process. We are at the stage of the reassessment, and we are getting the feedback of this proposal. First of all, with execution, assessing the corrective measures, monitoring, and what is the information that we need to include. We held journeys for curriculum updating. This was held last year, and we are designing it right now. My conclusions are, in order to achieve this, we require the political support of the managers. Another point, which is a very challenging one, is we needed to convince others that the model is the best, or at least we think that it's the best right now. We need to convince most of all the teachers so that they can accept all of these changes, switching from curative medicine to prevention and using simulators, having willingness to change, and having a multidisciplinary team. Of course, all of this requires a budget that can assure that we can make these changes. This is the medical school where we are showing all of the teachers. And definitely, I think that the fact that we worked together was one of our major assets. We convinced the teachers and the students, and all of us believed, we are convinced that we were doing the right thing. This was most important to achieve change. Because, as you know, there is always resistance to change, but most of the teachers accepted this change because all of us realized during the research that we did that we needed to switch or make a shift in how we are training our students so that they could be able to meet the demands of society. I think this is what helped us. This is what I wanted to share with you. Thank you for listening. Many, many thanks, Doctor. Thank you for sharing your experience with us. We are grateful to UNAM for their joint collaboration in this joint process, reviewing your respective curriculums. UNAM School of Medicine has also been reviewing its curriculum, and many of the academic staff involved in this are present here. We will have the opportunity later to listen to their specific vision. But before that, I would like all of us to quickly travel to Ensenada to give the floor to. We're going to travel to Ensenada where we will hear from Simitro Rojas, who is the head of the medical school at Xochicalco campus in Ensenada. I remember what Dr. Adolfo Chavez said once. One of the outcomes of the Better Health program is that the friendships that we have made. I really hope that these exchanges can be used to have a gastronomic type of exchange, because we have Peru University represented, and it would be great to learn how to prepare ceviche in Peru, how ceviche is prepared in Ensenada. Both of them are delicious. So thank you, Dr. Saavedra, for participating. We give the floor to Dr. Simitro Rojas from Ensenada University. Allow me to share my screen. I can hear you.
Sí, la están viendo, sí.
Sí, la vemos ahí.
Ok, muchas gracias por la
Can you see
invitación.
my screen?
Perdón, doctor, que le interrumpa. Si pudiésemos también pasarnos a
Can you please switch to full screen?
un poco más grande. Nos saludan por el chat desde Ensenada, doctor. Gracias por la convocatoria y por lo menos un uso.
We are getting greetings from the audience listening to us in Ensenada. We can see your slides very well now. Allow me to share with you what has been our competency-based approach. We worked on a competency-based curriculum that focused on competencies that is both modular and on a subject-by-subject basis, both. For 12 years, we've been working on it. We have and we also have a recent plan that we started 2 years ago. We know that we are currently going through an extremely fast change. Changes are a constant, they are growing, and this also has an impact and puts pressure on the health needs and the needs for training health professionals. So these situations demand from us having health professionals that have the necessary competencies so that they can apply them whenever they are working, whenever they are either doing research or they are teaching, so that we can make sure that if we cannot have a guarantee that they are going to do their best professionally. We train general practitioners, as many universities do. We do so through theoretical, practical, ethical, human, and attitude-based activities, which is what our competencies are demanding, because we want to have a future with better health professionals that are in charge of healthcare and of taking care of disease in our countries and in our communities. Our graduates should meet a professional profile, and that professional profile should respond to the social health needs and should respond to the context where they are practicing. Its purpose is to create a curriculum that provides a response or that meets those needs so that we can train them as best as possible so that they are capable of assuming this responsibility and face the needs or meet the needs in the best possible way. It's not only the application of knowledge, as all of us know it, and skills. No, it is also important for us, the teachers, to be able to guide the students so that the future physicians can also incorporate values that they need to in turn teach to others. These competencies are displayed during their professional practice. They need to be capable of applying their knowledge, And this includes attitudes in each of the interventions required, that is to say, knowledge, skills, both in healthcare and also within the field of research. What are the challenges of competency-based training? What are the challenges that we have found and that the literature has reported? Well, these are many, of course. They continue to be many. We are working hard at trying to meet some of them or overcome them, but they are constantly changing as well. So this is a frenzied type of change, but we are along this road. What is the purpose of this kind of training? Well, we need to assure their successful practice and performance in the future, but they need also to be successful as students. They need to prove to us that they have incorporated those competencies. So we try to promote self-criticism among students. The purpose of this is to make more and more adjustments so that they can, in a timely way, respond to the demands. Adjustments to the curriculum are very important. We have realized that a very rigid curriculum that is not flexible limits such changes or limits the incorporation of curriculum changes that are necessary, as has happened during the pandemic. We, as a university, are the pillars for the training of future generations. We are in charge of training the physicians that we want for the future. We are responsible for them being able to positively face and being capable of overcoming the challenges that we face as a mankind, particularly focusing on health. So we are aware of the social changes that occur, changes in the epidemiological profiles. There are many scientific advances. There is development of information and communications technology. There is advancement in social media and economies. There's globalization, internationalization, and regionalization. There are social, cultural, and demographic trends and change in health policies. In each one of them and in many others, we are going to face many, many challenges. These changes lead to new social and technological contexts that are novel, but they have repercussions on our training needs. So this exerts pressure so that we can make the educational reforms that are required. At specific institutions, one may work trying to effect such changes, and it's easier in private institutions. In public institutions, it's much more difficult, particularly in Mexico, because the public institutions have their own state plans, or their plans are linked to certain health policies for each of the states. The curriculum should define the right setting so that the students can acquire the necessary competencies. The profile of the graduate is extremely important. This profile should be fed by the entire social setting and the health needs. So the education modalities that are preferred and the material resources include group education activity, interaction, activities where the teachers are only facilitators of communication and learning, so that this way they can know what is their own responsibility and they can positively respond in such a way that they can favor the development of the knowledge, the skills, the attitudes, and the values that they need to showcase later. Within the profile of the graduate, which is the major reference when designing a curriculum and academic programs, of course, well, they need to be interconnected and intertwined. They need to be to be coincidental regarding the needs that they have to meet, and also they need to agree on how they're going to meet those needs and what kind of learning and teaching they're going to carry out. The major challenge also is to make sure that the students develop or result in the graduate profile that we have established previously. Some of the challenges are to consider the most relevant elements of the curriculum. In designing the curriculum, as was said before by Dr. Saavedra, we need to do this by groups. We need to do this in an organized way, trying to be able to meet the needs resulting from some of the major diseases. This competency-based curriculum that focuses on the graduate profile involves different important and technical activities, different types of materials, and a different assessment as well. We recently included, well, for 5 years, we have used simulation, and this allows us to make assessment of a simulation as well. It is important for us to establish the professional competencies that students should develop, as we said before, when they graduate. Of course, that we need to measure. We need to think about professional exams based on this approach. Of course, it's impossible to measure and assess everything, but we need to decide when we should be doing this. This should be the result of a training process, and this is the contribution of the university to the society and to people. Regarding the professional dimension, we need to teach them how to be healthcare professionals. And from the discipline standpoint, they need to have expertise and be service-oriented. They need to have a social responsibility that complies with professional ethics and values. They need to be permanently updated in topics around science, techniques, and technologies that support and contribute to their discipline, of course, improving their knowledge of scientific advances and their application. It is important to consider that information technology is moving very, very fast, and it is important for all of us to be interconnected. Our students in this research need to find the answers that allow them to be permanently updated and that can surf in the internet in an ethical way. We need to be able to work effectively with people, with other people. We have teamwork all over the university in the management area with the students. For learning competencies, it is important to do it with teamwork or group work around projects, to do work group interactively, so that this way we can also learn, or there is also a concomitant learning of respecting others, respecting oneself, and self-respect and respecting others. This is another competency that represents a challenge as well. We need to maintain and we need to plant in students the attitude of permanent personal growth. That needs to be something they do lifelong. This way they can acquire knowledge permanently. They need to be able to know how to manage stress. They need to be self-motivated, be resilient, and be able to self-enhance. This requires reflection. This requires individual and independent type of learning, have the capacity of critical, reflexive, and autonomous thinking. This needs a reasoning that is based on data and information. They need to be able to try to look for increased understanding and insight, and they need to know how to search and manage data and information. They need to be able to analyze and synthesize ideas and have a holistic vision and develop it with autonomy. This supported by their professors, trying to meet the competencies required so that we can have the graduate profile that we have determined. knowledge and management of the new information and communication technology, collaboration, try to carry out or have activities throughout their college years so that they can have a direct community, both oral communication in writing, nonverbal communication, so that there is respect for others' ideas and have good dialogue skills, applying proper costumes and social interactions. So it is important that they learn this, but that they also apply this because it is part of them. A constructive relationship with the social world where they live, being proactive in acting with other organizations where they participate, respecting and valuing human and cultural diversity, and emphasizing social responsibility, particularly environmental care. This is something that we need to emphasize. Pollution, the environment, and global warming, of course. Commitment to and respect for ethical universal values that include supporting the truth and justice, defending human rights, respecting or observing the legislation, and recognizing cultural diversity. Solidarity, particularly towards those that are unprivileged in the society, that we have, as you can see, there are many, many challenges they have to face. Curricula are one more of the dimensions that we are targeting. Curricula are organizations of experiences of teaching and learning that are proposed for medical training. Their main goal is to support the training needs that stem from the graduate profile that we have previously defined. But they also contribute to students when they graduate, they achieve the professional profile that we want to achieve. There is a wide variety of options like classes, workshops, project development, research, amongst others, that are conveniently conceived. They need to be properly planned so that we can be sure they're being done the right way for optimum progress and to achieve the goals of student learning. We would need to include activities that integrate their learnings, the different types of learnings, as I said before. This means that we need to do group work, teamwork, work around projects, and have a lot of interaction during learning. This way, we have university or teaching authorities that are fully pleased because their graduates are making contributions to the society. Other characteristics need to include that new curricula should include are orientation regarding the development of the competencies based on the graduate profile. There needs to be flexibility, as we said before. At times, if we have a too rigid curriculum, then there's little we can do because we can do something differently. There needs to be early contact with clinical activities. At this time of the pandemic and of the health crisis, this is difficult. So, as we say here, we have had a hard time doing this, but it is important to early on include them in clinical activities. We need to have collaboration and interaction with an active learning and learning together with us. They need to have the right guide of their teachers. Teachers need to be prepared to be the guides of the students. They need to have full knowledge of the curriculum, of the graduate's profile, and they need to be aware of the different methods and techniques so that they can apply them and be the right guide for the students so that we can achieve the competencies that we want. Activities to include knowledge in scenarios that evoke and simulate the professional practice settings. We have, for instance, a simulation lab where we have been working in a limited way due to the characteristics of our lab. It's not very large. However, it does help us helps students practice some of the most complex activities in different fields of medicine. Curriculum activities need to be conceived and configured so that we clearly establish what are the competency elements that are being developed and strengthened. We need to strengthen them with each of the activities that we are planning in the didactic and operational plans. They need to communicate the work modality to the students, tell them how the activities need to be carried out and what is expected. These approaches to achieving the graduate's profile need to be planned in a successive or sequential way so that they are increasingly complex. Assessment needs to be objective, assessment of performance. I don't want to elaborate on this because this is a very complex topic. We are working with competency assessment with the different types of exams or questionnaires that provide us with greater objectivity about their performance so that we can make the right judgment and assessment. So these are some of the evaluation tools that we are using now. Lastly, we need to understand clearly that assessment, which is a fundamental element, is not only cognitive. If we do this only, then we are using inappropriately tools that are not the right ones. We need to make assessment using different techniques. We need to use with rubricas, ECOI, the sex or mini-sex exam that have been our working horses, and we are applying them increasingly better. Of course, it's complex to design all of these tools, plan them, and organizing them because you need more staff. And of course, the cost is higher, like Rubrica, but we feel confident that we are properly assessing the performance of the students. We want quality performance when we assess it. I will end my presentation here. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Rojas, for this very detailed presentation about how you design, build, and facilitate the training of physicians and healthcare professionals that we want. Thank you for your participation. Our next speaker is Dr. Luis Miguel. No, we're going to give the floor to Dr. Marco Antonio Escalante from Marisa University in Mérida. We go to the other end of the Mexican Republic. And of course, this, if he's from Mérida, this would give us the opportunity of having a culinary or gastronomic platform, because in Mérida, food is also delicious. But Dr. Escalante, you now have the floor. Many, many thanks, Alejandro. Yes, you're right. You have your home in Mérida. If you want to eat cochinita tacos, papazules, stuffed cheese. So yes, it would be great to hold a culinary session or gastronomic session with us, with all of us. I'm very excited for having this opportunity to participate with all of you. Competencies are, without any doubt, a fundamental part of what we do on a daily basis in medical education. If you allow me, I'll try to share my screen.
Y modalidad. Ok, perfecto, muy bien. Entonces,
Preparé esta presentación sobre retos del enfoque por competencias en ciencias.
I'm going to speak about the challenges of a competency-based approach in health sciences. Marista University in Merida is a university that has been created 5 years ago. Our medical school was established in 2011. So it's been 10 years since the school was established. We have 3 generations of graduates. The curriculum is 7 years long. Ever since the medical school was created, it was competency-based. This is what we have tried to do along all of these years, and this has represented a challenge. As all of us, the definition of competency is a set of knowledge, skills, attitudes, values, and aptitudes that are interrelated and that allow an efficient professional performance according to the state of the art. I would like to underscore the ethical commitment and values, because we might be used to the fact that the students may get knowledge, teachers deposit that knowledge on them, they receive it, and then later they have to apply it. But this has changed. Right now, students are the ones who need to build this knowledge besides their knowledge, attitudes, and values. You cannot be a good physician or healthcare professional if you are not a good person. At the university, we are much committed, as many other national and international organizations, with the training of healthcare professionals that act ethically and have values. What are the necessary competencies based on the current needs? I think this is the big question that that needs to be our starting point. We need to ask whether we are using the right competencies for our time, because times have changed, diseases have changed. For instance, the pandemic has completely changed our lives. We need to ask whether we are training the professionals that we need for the current times. That is a reflection that we need to ask when we discuss competencies. We know that there are many things that won't change. Of course, we need to learn anatomy, physiology, pharmacology, internal medicine, surgery, etc. But we also need to think if there are certain things that we have to change. And one of them is health education. We need to remove the protagonic or the role of the physician that is seen as the one that will come and cure the population. We need to empower the population so that they can be uh, responsible for their own health and participate in having a good health. So we need to teach physicians how to involve the communities and patients so that they realize that they have to be part of their own health and their community health. As professionals, healthcare professionals or physicians, it's impossible for us to solve all the problems alone. We need the support of the population. As you know, in Mexico, there is a proposal which is the competency profile of the general practitioner. This is, I'm showing you the publication here. It was prepared by many professionals. They include 7 competencies that have other universities have taken, and they are using to be able to train their healthcare professionals. They include mastery of general medical practice, mastery of scientific basis of medicine, methodological and instrumental capability in sciences and humanities, ethical and professionalism practice, mastery of the quality of healthcare, and teamwork. This is where interdisciplinary work is involved, being able to work with a nurse, with a psychologist, with a nutritionist or dietist, with a psychotherapist, and so on. We physicians need to work with other healthcare professionals because it's impossible for us to do everything. Mastery of community care, which is fundamental, and that's why I spoke about health education. We need to know how to work in a community. At times, students graduate wanting to do a residency or a fellowship, a specialization, but only a few of them think about practicing in a community. We have people coming from a community that after graduating might go back to their community and teach their own community how to take care of their health, and capability of participating in the healthcare system. Finally, The importance of competencies, it lies in the capability of addressing current problems. There have been epidemiological changes, as we said before. Diseases have changed, and we need to consider this when we decide the curriculum. That's why curricula need to be updated periodically every 5 to 6 years. Of course, COVID has revolutionized everything. We have seen how a pandemic can radically change things. A result of this is that we have had to be closer to other health professionals, like these virtual forums and conversations that have been organized. We don't have to travel. With a computer, we can listen to another healthcare professional teaching us something, or we can participate in forums. This has been something positive, and without any doubt, this will continue in the coming years. They will be part of the training of healthcare professionals. Chronic degenerative diseases, the change in the population pyramid, where we'll have an increasing older population because of the longer life expectancy. So we need to develop competencies that are focused on taking care of these conditions and older patients. We also need to be able to use technologies for diagnosis and treatment. It's not only a matter of assessing the final outcome. We are used to looking at the grades, for instance, in assessing students. We see the grades for each of the subjects, but when you get your professional title, it doesn't say what are your competencies. It says anatomy, physiology, pharmacology, but the final report card does not say everything that the student did to be able to get that grade. We need to do competency-based evaluation, but our grades are in numbers, and students are used to learning by memory, but we need to teach them how to solve problems and not only think about their grades. I think that we have not been very congruent, because if someone wants to do their social service somewhere or applies for a fellowship, what is considered is their final grade, the number. But probably someone has the best grade but is not very good at problem solving. So we need to review how is it that we are assessing the students and see if we are considering their problem solving capabilities. It's not only the final outcome, but the process required to solve the problem. What are the implications? I use here, I'm quoting this from Dr. Durante and Dr. Sara. We need to use a learning-based approach. Students need to be at the center of the process and not the professor. We have the challenge that we have professors who are trained with a different system, and it's very different for them to implement a new system to teach the students. We have a romantic view, thinking this is how I learned, so this is how you should learn. However, students are living and will practice at a very different time with other characteristics, and this is something that we have to review. We need to work with students through being their tutors or advisors. There needs to be consistency amongst the subjects, the subject matters, the modules, or the areas regarding competencies. We need to apply diverse teaching or learning strategies and not only multiple choice tests. We have other tools to assess the students. We want to achieve an integration between basic and clinical knowledge and theoretical and practical skills. We need to promote collaborative work, as I said before, with other healthcare professionals, develop assessment or comprehensive system, taking into account the curriculum, the learning, the teaching, feedback, and permanent update of all the components, updating all of the contents and materials, and deciding what are the competencies that will be taken into account as part of the curriculum. And I'm underlining the training and uh, education of teachers continually. We need them to be capable of being able to teach on a competency-based curriculum, because in the end, the student will have to face a patient and know how to solve the problem. So they need to learn this, and they need to learn it from teachers that are capable of giving this kind of training. And they need to be They need to have full knowledge of medical knowledge and be able to apply it. These are the different trajectories for learning. This is what we prepared at the university. It's what we call a curricular map that shows several colors that show the different competencies in the university map. I show this as an example because we may have generic competencies that all students have, whether they are in medicine, nutrition, physiotherapy, and so on. They need to communicate and express themselves properly. They need to have social responsibility, know how to serve others, use the scientific method, know themselves, and be autonomous as people. And we have trajectories of the graduate profile that are specific to medical school. We have four of, there were seven, but three we did not use because we considered that within the generic ones, they were already considered. So we were left with four. They are mastery of general medical practice, mastery of scientific basis, ethics and professionalism, and mastery of community care. This color map, this clinic biologics in green, we have the physiology lab number 2, microbiology lab number 3. These numbers show the number that the competency is taught and the evidence that is provided. Of course, not all subject matters involve giving evidence, but we try to introduce the competency, reinforce it, and at the end, we want to consolidate it. This is how we assess them. What are the tools that we are using for this process? We use portfolios, of course, our simulation center. We have a simulation center which is quite sponsored by the American Heart Association and the United States National Simulation Center. Through clinical cases, we can assess the problem-solving capability of the students, not only asking them to memorize things, but sharing with them clinical cases and seeing how they address them. We need to do activities in the clinical field, which is important as well. And we may include whatever we want. We may include assessment of capability for instance, resuscitation of a neonate or things that have to do with miscarriage, abortion. The nice thing about this is that we can include all sorts of clinical cases that the students will face, and so that they can learn to approach them in the best possible way. Once we have assessed the competencies through rubrics, these assessments are uploaded in the system. This is what the professor does. The students also assess that competency. Once the professor has assessed the students through this, in the curriculum, we see how the competency performance is doing. The purpose of this is to be able to show us how is it that if the student is meeting the graduate's profile. Or the goal is that at the end, they consolidate all of the competencies in the curricular map and they meet all of the required competencies. We restructured our curriculum 2 years ago. We finished last month. We tried to focus on the problem situations. All of the subjects have an access problem. So it's not only pulmonologists, a patient with respiratory tract infections, someone living far away with a chronic disease that can't afford to pay for the medications. What are you doing? What will you do to solve that patient's problem? How are you going to provide comprehensive care and not only say you have tuberculosis, you have to take this drug, but how am I going to assist you so that you can get the drug? How did you get the disease? How is it that they're cooking inside your house? What is going on? We need to consider the full patient's setting and not only diagnose diseases and provide treatment. Giving evidence of learning in all the subject matters. We want all students to provide their portfolio or certain activities that allow us to assess them. That's why we created the subject, we included the subject of basic sciences and clinical knowledge integration in all of the semesters, because it would happen that students would come to a clinical practice which is quite complicated because they are together with doctors who are not very much aware of what competency-based learning is. So we need that all professors that are in contact with the students know how to assess them according to the graduate's profile. So we want to have a basic clinical integration at all semesters. And we also have to assess the performance of that competency. To close, I think that we need to train healthcare professionals according to the current needs. Students need to try to get useful and interesting knowledge, to know how to use knowledge, criticize it, and reconstruct it, and not only do it to get a grade. We need to train the teachers and determine whether there are any changes needed in our curriculum. In this case, we did it through integration of clinical and basic learning. And this is how we're trying to assess our students in the best possible way so that they can have the graduate's profile that is required for the various higher education institutions. So thanks to all of you for your time. Thank you very much, Dr. Escalante. This was a wonderful presentation. There are many comments in the chat thanking you. I would like to say that you and the previous speakers have highlighted the technical rigor in the academic approach of your presentations. We are very grateful for such a very serious and professional presentations. We have a last presentation before we hold a discussion with opportunities to hear the questions from the audience. So we would like to give the floor now to Dr. Rocio Tirado, representing UNAM School of Medicine. So we're going to travel all the way to Mexico City Valley. Thank you, Dr. Tirado. I would like to recognize you and all of the members of the academia participating in the update process. Thank you very much, Alejandro. It's my honor to represent UNAM Medical School and the university itself. Let me share my screen. Please let me know if you can see my screen properly.
Ya está en pantalla completa.
Perfecto.
Ustedes me... ¿Sí? Entonces podemos empezar. Bueno, de nuevo.
Let's get started now. Once again, many thanks for this invitation, for giving the privilege of representing the UNAM Medical School, my university, of course. I would like to begin by reminding you the definition of how is it that competencies are formed. This is a picture that tells more than the words that I show on the slide, because it represents this network that allows the integration of knowledge based on learning. I'm referring to significant, self-regulated, situated learning, and without any doubt, collaborative learning. This network is telling us that we are not only referring to one student, one individual, but as other speakers have said, this represents collaborative team and work group, allowing for medical students to be able to integrate their knowledge and be nurtured with the information and the expertise of other health professionals. I think it is a huge benefit to be able to integrate all of these areas of knowledge a long time. Something that I like very much about this learning, thinking about auto-regulated, significant and situated and collaborative learning, is that it is not linear. It occurs as a spiral, as a helix. When I saw this, it made me think about a spiral stair in which each of the steps contributes to going up and the experience that they get during their training. So learning is not linear. At each step represents what we are learning as time goes by. This is what this diagram represents. What is the purpose of competencies in the training of physicians in general? I think it is important to review these 5 purposes that are the axis at our medical school. to guide comprehensive training as an essential condition of the physicians, to integrate theory with practice, and promote construction of autonomous learning, to promote development of higher cognitive processes like communication, complex and critical thinking, because in the end, this will lead to integration, to promote active learning methodologies like significant, situated, autonomous, collaborative, or regulated learning, and promote the skills for reasoning and clinical judgment from the primary healthcare approach. These are the 5 axes and purposes that correspond to a series of challenges. How are we going to face and overcome each of the challenges? First of all, with the teaching methodologies, with curricula, with assessment and professional training. Regarding the teaching methodologies, I agree with all those who have presented so far. It's going to be essential that professors, all of those teaching groups, are willing to learn and to enrich the way in which we teach and even to favor our own learning. In my view, this is a fundamental challenge. Our medical school has tried to meet the 5 previous goals, and we have tried to address each of the challenges that we are seeing on the screen. Along this timeline, I show you how we have 2 large approaches, starting with 2010 with a competency-based curriculum, from 2011 to 2015, development of teaching, training, and assessments based on competency. I underscore this, which is part of our core program. Our willingness of us, our professors, to have an open mind to knowledge, to new ways of teaching and learning. This is going to be crucial in favoring among students the auto-regulated learning. From 2016 to 2019, we did assessment of the 2010 curriculum and dissemination of results in order to improve competency-based training. Finally, 2020, we conducted a competency-based curriculum update. This is a timeline showing how the medical school has approached each of these steps. The pandemic has not stopped us. We have continued to review our curriculum. We have worked at it virtually, remotely, very, very hard. Based on this timeline and based on the multidisciplinary work of the various departments that are part of the medical school, there are 8 basic competencies that stem from this: critical thinking, clinical judgment, decision making, and information management. Auto-regulated and permanent learning, effective communication, not only in the classroom, but also when one has to do clinical work. Knowledge and application of biomedical, socio-medical, and clinical sciences in practicing medicine. Clinical skills, including diagnosis, prognosis, treatment, and rehabilitation. Professionalism, ethical aspects, and legal responsibilities. Population health and the healthcare system that involves health promotion and disease prevention. And finally, personal development and growth. Each of these 8 competencies that define our curriculum are underdivided and include a series of attributes, each one of them. Something relevant is that these competencies will encompass from intermediate profile 1 all the way to the full professional profile, and the attributes will be distributed throughout the training of the medical students. As I said before, each of these 8 competencies includes various attributes that maintain a progressive relationship amongst all of the different training profiles: intermediate 1 and 2, graduate profile, and professional profile. They favor comprehensive pedagogical profiles. Let me say something in parentheses before I show you the 7 steps that have led to the update of our curriculum. This is a work that I'm sharing with you because I actively participated in it. It began prior to the pandemic. It consisted of making a multidisciplinary review with the teams that did collaborative work, and we worked very harmonically in reviewing each of the profiles. This allowed me to learn from those who are part of other departments. It allowed me to learn the vision of training of medical students. So we reviewed each of the competencies with each of its attributes all along the medical training, of course, including each what corresponded to us from basic sciences all the way to the clinical teaching. And this led us to the second point that included a series of recommendations. Once we reviewed this grid, there were many comments. There were many important modifications with the participation of many academics and students, of course. Which were the recommendations that stemmed from this work? Well, we updated the competency attributes because each of the competencies included various attributes. To update the competency attributes of the various profiles, intermediate, the of graduates, professional, according to the cognitive demand and complexity level. To update the curricula according to the competency approach and establish their learning results. To design a teacher's training model for competency-based teaching and assessment. To design an assessment model of competency-based training, include human dignity, human rights, and gender perspective, and social training axis, because this is part of the physician's training, to design programs that favor comprehensive development of students within the educational, socio-emotional, and personal realms. These were some of the recommendations made after we reviewed the grid. We are now proposing 7 basic points that have to do with the curriculum update. These are the ones that we have approached as time has gone by. The first one is competencies, graduates, and professional profile. This is what I share with you based on my very rewarding personal experience of analyzing the grid with colleagues of the different departments. We made a review on a competency by competency basis and by attributes. Once this was done, the next stage was no less interesting. It consisted of competencies and learning of curriculum on a subject by subject basis. I'm part of the microbiology and parasitology department. So we worked together with the various professors at the department. We worked together. And to tell you the truth, this was very rewarding. Of course, this was very tiring. It was a very hard work to check each of the competencies and the attributes. And we had to make sure that they agreed with our subject matter and that they were feasible. As I said before, competencies are not linear. We understood this, and they can be intercalated. This didn't matter, but it was a bit difficult to understand this before. We understood that these are 8 competencies that we included for the entire curriculum. We, in the field of microbiology and parasitology, which were those that we were meeting, which of the attributes were we promoting or were we teaching to the students. So during these meetings, we were able to reach agreements. And so we were able to understand the results of their learning and the different assessment indicators that were prepared as part of the matrix. This exercise was done at each of the departments that are part of the medical school. What the interesting part of this is that we were able to understand that each of these departments, considering each of the profiles, help us meet each of the competencies, the 8 competencies, and each of the attributes corresponding to each competency. This was a very fruitful experience because it allowed us to learn, which is most important. We have to keep an open mind and be willing to learn as well if we want to teach something new to our students coming from a generation completely different from ours. Number 3 is competencies and teaching. Analysis of the needs of the teachers for competency-based teaching. Let me stop for a while on this because I agree with what others have said. I guess we have lost Dr. Tirado. We lost her. We'll try to see if she reconnects. Can you hear us, Dr. Tirado?
Perdió la conexión. Si les parece, en lo que la doctora restablece la comunicación.
Her connection was interrupted while she is able to come back. Why don't we start seeing what is the feedback that we have received from panelists, because we are almost running out of time. Let me give the floor to our colleagues from the United Kingdom. It's already dark in this autumn day. Sonia and Ravi, you have the floor while we have Dr. Tirado coming back, particularly because we know that you have an engagement at 7 p.m. London time. We would like to hear what are your comments, Sonia and Ravi. Oh, Dr. Tirado is back. If you don't mind, Dr. Tirado, our UK colleagues have to leave right on time, on the hour. So why don't we give them the floor now so that they can react to these extraordinary participations? Many thanks, Dr. Tirado. Ravi, Sonia.
Thank you, Alejandro, and thank you everyone for all the really interesting presentations. I think for me, one of the key reflections is the alignment between what everyone's saying around that we need to sort of we need to think beyond traditional approaches to medical education. A competency-based framework gives you opportunities for this. And some of the key values, I think, that are important for all of us around social responsibility and social justice. Those are the sort of key reoccurring themes. I know that there is a question actually in the chat. I scroll back. So I'll let Ravi give his reflections, and then maybe we can answer the question in the chat or and any other questions from the floor.
Thank you, Sonia, and thank you, everyone. It's been really interesting to hear different perspectives, and I was agreeing, I completely agree with what Sonia said there. I think nearly every speaker was talking about the challenges around training doctors to be able to meet the needs of our local population, particularly around areas around social justice. And I was really interested to hear around the development of competencies around sustainable healthcare, issues around climate change and the impact of climate change, which I think is really a forefront of some of our minds at the moment, particularly. So really fascinating to hear, and I think certainly things that we can try and take back for our own curriculum as well. So really inspiring to hear that. Thank you so much. I don't know if you've got the question there, Sonia, to hand.
I have. It's from Milena. And what Milena was saying here is that how do you sort of encourage and motivate supervisors when they've got their own clinical workloads, they're having to teach trainees, manage trainee difficulties, when there isn't often any recognition in pay or otherwise? And is this something we struggle with? And I suppose the answer quickly is a big yes. I don't know, Ravi, whether you want to sort of start off with that and then I can add in.
Absolutely, yes. There are two things that came to my mind when you're saying that. One of them was around recognition from an academic and title perspective. We've now set up systems whereby people who are contributing towards the medical curriculum, including things like supervising of students and academic support, are often given honorary titles and access to university resources. And that prestigious role and title itself has a real appeal for a lot of our clinicians, and can be sometimes a real driver for recruitment to those roles. So that's one thing. Often that's not enough, and the issue around resource and pay is a real challenge. We've been able to organise funding for a system at Imperial where we use academic tutors, whereby an academic member of staff, a faculty member of staff, and that can be a scientist or a clinician, will have a group of students, up to 12 students, from the first year of medical school all the way through to the end of medical school. And they stay with that same group as they progress through and have a number of meetings with them. And those tutors are providing with training on how to engage with those tutees on personal pastoral issues, but also on things like study skills, how they're going to progress through their competencies as they go through each year. And that is being funded. it's been challenging to get that funding from what I've heard, but I certainly think it's been a real driver and a real success for the students as they get to really stay with that tutor all the way through the year. And then the last thing I would say is some of our clinicians have been able to develop job plans where they're able to have dedicated time within their job plans to have space for teaching and supervision of medical students, which is obviously a very difficult thing to do. But if you're able to do that, then that can add a real benefit, because obviously then that's funded through your original role. And if there's anything else you want to add, Sonia, on that.
Yeah, no, I suppose I was just thinking, you know, I think also there's awards and conferences, so sort of, you know, building a bit of a community of practice amongst your educators. I think we all like getting awards. It's sort of, it's recognition and validation for all the work that we're doing. And also conferences allow people to showcase what they're doing, similar to this, allowing educators to get involved in research. But you know, I think what I'm hearing from Melina is that they don't, they're struggling with time, let alone giving them more jobs. So that's, I suppose, just the last thing I was going to add is, I guess, how students are seen. Are they seen as a sort of capacity drain or as a capacity gain? And some of the approaches that we've trialed that we'll be talking about through some of the other sessions is where students are acting as service partners whilst they're on placement. So it's not that I don't have time to teach the students are actually acting as paraprofessionals alongside you, helping to manage patients. So there's sort of not, clearly when there's a student in difficulty or trainees in difficulty, that's another matter, and they do take up time, but almost changing the role of the student. So the student is very much contributing to the life and work of a ward or a GP practice, or, you know, whatever clinical settings you have.
Muchas gracias, Sonia, muchas gracias, Ravi, y sabemos que...
No se escucha, Alejandro.
Bueno.
Thanks, Sonia. Thanks, Ravi. Thank you very much. Thanks, Sonia. Thanks, Ravi. Many, many thanks. You had told us from the beginning that you had an engagement in 5 minutes. So I would like to suggest, for those of us who can stay for a few more minutes in the session, to continue to hear to the presentations and reflect on them. This is a session that is being recorded for those of you who cannot stay longer. So we can go back to the presentation by Rocio from UNAM. That is a good way to conclude the session and to close. Dr. Tirado, thank you for being so thoughtful. Can you hear us now, Dr. Tirado? Yes, no problem. Thank you. Allow me to share my screen again.
¿Ya pueden verlo todos?
Muchas gracias, lo vemos perfectamente.
Perfecto, ¿y me escuchan perfecto?
We can see you and we can hear you.
Bueno, en este esquema de 7 puntos importantes.
In the scheme where I mentioned the 7 major points, number 3 seems to me as very relevant. This is something that other speakers address, which is the need for training the teachers for competency-based teaching. I think this is core, the training of the professors who are delivering competency-based teaching. I'm thinking particularly about the medical school. The design of teaching, of training model for teachers includes teaching competencies, teaching methodology, the strengthening of teaching identity, initial and ongoing training, and assessing the teachers. This is important for those who are in basic sciences, but it will also be relevant for professors who are in the clinical area or the hospital area. This is going to be an important challenge that the school will have to face properly. Number 4 is on competencies and assessment, analysis of the forms, mechanisms, and instruments that are congruent with the competency-based approach. Design of the assessment model having to do with the competency profiles with results of the learning and indicators, strengthening training assessment, and verifying the performance levels of the intermediate profiles. This is something that is underway. 5, 6, and 7 include the integration of results of the 4 prior points, collegiate feedback, of course, that has been established, including the participation of both the teachers and the students, and finally, the approval of this update of the curriculum. After completing these 7 key points of the update, it is very relevant to consider that a series of challenges are going to be faced. Each of these challenges involves a proposal to be solved. Which are the challenges that we will face once this curriculum is approved? The ones that we're going to face. The first challenge is interiorization of competencies in the training of students and professionalization of teachers in competency-based teachers. This is one of the challenges. How are we intending to address this challenge, or what are our proposals? First of all, course for teachers, academic programs that are linked to competencies, using competency-based teaching and learning methodologies, comprehensive development programs for the students. What is the other challenges? Integrating the evaluation forms and mechanisms in training processes of students and the teachers. What are we proposing to approach this challenge? Well, courses to teachers for competency-based assessment to favor their participation, design, implementation, results analysis, and meta-assessment of competencies, feedback opportunity, and proper use of assessment results, active participation of teachers and students in competency-based training. This is a relevant challenge because it involves the active participations of the teachers. How are we going to approach this challenge? Well, through experience exchange, design of activities to exchange experiences, links with the community and the clinical field, and permanent integration and complex amongst the different areas and stages so that we can verify the advancement of the teaching. This is a key role. How can we address permanent integration channel? Well, first of all, participation of the teachers and students in academic activities to favor the dialogue among them, to create groups of the different areas and curriculum for designing assessment instruments and integrating learning activities, of course, including the profiles, participation in transdisciplinary processes so that we can address frequent morbidity and mortality causes. What is the next challenge? To work together with the labor sectors or work sectors to respond to the needs of the market. This is a more advanced profile. Which are the proposals for this key challenge? To design experience exchange activities, designing exchange experience activities in competency-based learning, and linking with the community and the clinical field. Another challenge is diversifying non-clinical medical training. How are we going to face this challenge? What is it that they propose? What is the educational offer for professional development, management, medical education, public policies, and research? We need to diversify physicians in other areas of knowledge that I think represent basic contributions. This is the final challenge. This is what we have to close my presentation. Once again, thanks for this invitation. Let me stop sharing. Many, many thanks, Doctor. I think this was a very nice way to close all of the presentations with your conclusion, with this conclusion representing the UNAM Medical School. Thank you very, very much. I would now like to give the floor to the speakers who would like to take the floor so that they can react, ask questions. thanks to all those who are staying for longer than expected so that we can continue the discussion. Dr. Adolfo Chavez, you have the floor. Many, many thanks. I'm very excited to hear this variety of opinions, all of them having to do with the competencies, with the capabilities, and the skills that I would add and that were not very much mentioned around the surgery. But let me refer to what Dr. Tirado said about the UNAM's curriculum. This is something that I have replicated in other Latin American countries. As the major provider for continuing medical education for general practitioners in the country, we are much worried because these competencies that have been mentioned theoretically, they are really not reflected in the interest of physicians graduating from the 167 medical schools in the country, so that they wish to become primary healthcare professionals or general practitioners, as we call them. In other countries like the UK, well, they have taught us that this represents the cornerstone for prevention of chronic non-communicable diseases. Why is it that most of our graduates that have achieved these competencies that are very clear, why is it that they want to do a residency and they are not interested in the prevention that primary healthcare emphasizes? Dr. Tirado, this is a question directed to you. Oscar raised his hand. Would you like to say something before I answer, before I react? Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Chavez. This is Oscar Barrera, head of the unit for curriculum development and academic development at the UNAM Medical School. In the past years, we started an assessment process, not only of competencies, but of everything that is articulated through competencies for the training of physicians so that we can have graduates that are linked not only to the labor market, but so that they can continue to work professionally in certain areas that are unfortunately breaking the structure that we have for the training of GPs. These updates of the curriculum have taken place in 2016. For 2 years, we have undergone a curriculum update process that is trying to provide a comprehensive sense to these competencies so that we can have a progressive process through which students can acquire conceptual knowledge, skills, attitudes, abilities, and values that allow them to be aware of not as the part of the inertia with which we have been training specialists, but they need to be aware of our need to have good general practitioners that meet the health demands of the population. This curricular update that mentioned by Dr. Tirado is something that is constantly moving. This is an update that occurs comprehensively and that takes into account not in a separate way, but rather in a joint way, the stages and the process of learning, teaching, and assessment. But we are rather working jointly. So our priority is the primary healthcare approach. We are trying to strengthen the training of general practitioners, and there are social training axes that include human dignity, gender perspective, assessment of human diversity, and assessment of intercultural settings so that we can have a practical type of strengthening amongst students throughout their training trajectory so that we can strengthen this link with them, with their medical identity, but also with communities in this exercise of empowerment, always focusing on the patient as the target of our training. This is so that in the end, a good general practitioner can prevent us from having 2 or 3 years during which they detect, for instance, a condition like cancer that could have been diagnosed earlier or in a timely fashion. so that they can refer that patient to the right specialist. So this is something that does not involve only a work from medical school authorities. There has been the participation of students, alumni, specialists in education, in assessment, and at our medical school, we have also worked with other national universities that we are meeting that have joined us here. We've worked with the universities in Iberoamerica, with the Imperial College London itself. So we are trying to see what are these not only health needs in Mexico, but also within the communities in the region and globally, so that we can provide a response, an answer now, but also thinking about what is coming in the next 20 years. So the curriculum update process that Dr. Tirado will speak to us about, or will elaborate for us, focuses on trying to break that inertia of specialization, because students decided to do a residency and they go to a subspecialty but don't focus on their training as GPs. This is evidently causing problems on their medical identity, on the training of students themselves, and problems in the timely detection of diseases. At the medical school, we are undergoing a process of analyzing this set of needs. We are working precisely to try to revert this effect so that we can have a general medicine that meets the needs of our time and of our setting, where for those of us living in Mexico and Latin America. Thank you, Dr. Chavez. I would now like to give the floor to Dr. Tirado. Allow me, if I may, to give an example that I think is fantastic in this respect. I'm referring to approach to medical students approaching their communities. The public health department organizes a series of practices that, for obvious reasons, have not occurred due to the pandemic, not in the same way. However, they go to their communities, and it seems to me that this exercise of taking second year students to their community, having them participate, approach their community, and with the knowledge they have at that time, start having contact with the people, knowing how to deal with them, how to detect diseases, and so on, is very interesting. This is something that has already been established at the public health department. During the pandemic, I had the opportunity of participating in an event of the second year medical school students that had to go to their own community and provide relevant information about the pandemic in that community. So they were in charge of disseminating this kind of information. We held meetings to assist them, of course, according to their level of knowledge. And we hoped that this going back to their communities, and it could be their family, friends, or neighbor community, can start telling them about how relevant it is for a general practitioner to participate in care in their community, regarding less of what might happen later when they select a specialty. But I think this is a very rewarding and fundamental feedback mechanism. It's important for us and for them during their training. That's the comment I wanted to make. Go ahead with other comments. Dr. Escalante. Many, many thanks. Congratulations. Undoubtedly, of course, students have to be in touch with people at the community. So this vision is very important. I wanted to share with you a program that we have at the university, where students of all bachelor's degrees go to their communities to learn about those communities, and also to learn them to teach them what they are learning, with the purpose of empowering the people of the community. We have a health education program also, that is a bit more advanced. Here, the students give a peer education and people in the community. We have Mayan communities as well. They even learn to measure blood glucose levels in the community. They organize nutrition workshops with the participation of the students. We try to bring them to these communities so that they can teach people how to take care of their health. And as was said before, to probably drive them to decide to go back to their community and work them. Of course, many doctors want to do a residency, but we need to promote this. We need to have GPs that are willing to work in their community, that are properly paid. So that's important for them to go back to their community and participate in these projects. Many, many thanks, Dr. Dr. Simitrio Rojas. I have a comment about this. In our own experience, during the first 5 semesters, we have a community and public health. We first work on theory and group activities so that we can teach them how to work and make diagnoses. We visit the community on a weekly basis from semester 2 throughout 4 semesters. We go to the communities with one purpose: to make a health diagnosis of the geodemographic area of a marginalized area or in an area of marginalized areas in the city. We apply a project-based work. This is how we work. And we work in small work groups, trying to strengthen that interaction. So we are in contact with the community. We perform basic interventions of health promotion once that we are integrating the diagnoses in the different teams. At the end of the project, they usually finish feeling very, very happy, very pleased. And we organize a forum where they participate and share their project with others. They are extremely motivated, enthusiastic. They work on primary healthcare. They are involved with their community. They work in teams on a project by project basis. And we are aware of the fact, despite this, that there is something that is happening. It may be, as I said before, probably think how much they're paid, or this is due to a tradition, the difference in the pay that one gets in the city compared to a rural community and so on. There are many, many factors involved, but this is always striking. We just finished a study regarding the preference of students from the beginning of first year of medical school. We asked them what are their expectations, and it's the same. 80% of them intended to become specialists. So there are multiple phenomena that are involved, or many factors. So we are definitely facing a difficult situation in trying to create competency-based teams that can take care of the community. This is due to difficulties that are not medical or are not training related, but we need to take into account when we consider the training. Many, many thanks, doctor. I don't know if UNAM Medical School would like to make a final comment. With this, we would close our academic session. I would only like to thank everyone. It's my view that our medical school has advanced at quantum leap during the pandemic regarding the curriculum. This is very satisfactory for each of the professors participating in the review of the curriculum, of course, without leaving aside students. I really hope that this will culminate so that each of the challenges that are presented at the end can be met appropriately with the various replies to the challenges. what Doctors Chavez, Rojas, and Escalante just said about promoting community work, in my view, is something that should need to be supported throughout the training of students at medical school. That might make them more aware about the needs of their communities, and they may have a different perspective. Dr. Rojas is right. The pay or the status of being a specialist plays a role in them wanting to become specialists. And the working conditions of GPs are not always the best, but this is something that our school needs to continue to promote. This is a nice comment that we did not consider when we reviewed the curriculum, but it seems to me that this is another very important challenge that adds to the challenges that had already been established. Many, many thanks, Dr. Lisbeth Valdez, raise her hands. And this is going to be the last participation before Dr. Luis Fernando Barraza invites us to tomorrow's sessions. Before we give the floor to you, to the other doctor, I would like to recognize Gabriela Herrera and Gabriela Durazo. Thank you for the simultaneous interpretation to make sure this meeting is accessible. This is one of the principles that we are considering for this kind of events, accessible. There is hunger for this kind of dialogues. Our time is over, unfortunately, and it's time to end. Can you hear us, doctor? You have the floor. Yes, thanks, Alejandro. I would like to close by sharing with you a thought of Dr. Sergio Tobon having to do with competency-based training and our Latin American references, and how the importance of speeches and dialogue amongst Latin American universities allow us to recognize the setting where we live in, so that we don't simply transfer theories that are defined in European or North American countries, but we need to recognize what our true context is about, our social problems, and see how is it that general practitioners or primary health physicians can respond to these needs that have to do with human rights, human dignity, gender perspective, and the capacity of responding in a proficient way to the problems that our countries are experiencing. With this, I would like to close by thanking the universities who participated. We should maintain this dialogue amongst Latin American universities and with the UK, of course, because they have guided us and provided their advice to us regarding what is it that we can do in assessing competencies and other important elements. Thank you very much. Many, many thanks, Doctor. Luis, you have the floor. Many, many thanks, Alejandro. Many thanks also to the people who participated with us, both the panelists, the audience. It is always a big honor to participate in this kind of events because there's a lot to learn. And I think that together we are building a collective knowledge that is larger than the one that we might acquire individually. So this is something that we have to recognize. Personally, this is something that I really like. I'm not seeing my screen that I was trying to share, but let me announce that tomorrow at 9 a.m. Mexico time, we're going to discuss health, equity, and gender from 9 a.m. to 11 p.m. Mexico time. The second session will take place from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Mexico time on transdisciplinary leadership, training, and teamwork. UK hours is 3 to 5 p.m. and 5 to 7 p.m. respectively. I hope you can all join us. Thank you again. Thank you, Doctor. We will close this session now. I would like to thank everyone in the different countries that you joined us from. We hope to see you tomorrow. Please log in knowledge.health, where we will be updating the information with the speakers and the topics of the 14 sessions. that prompt us to think about health and education, the future that needs to be shaped. On behalf of UNAM School of Medicine, the Embassy of the UK in Mexico, and all of our partners and collaborators in this program, ENEO Psychology School, Coma N, Coma Eje, of course, AMSA. Thanks to all of you once again. We are willing to continue with this dialogue and reflection. May you have an excellent evening and afternoon.
It's a little bit funny, this thing I can do. My gift is my song, yeah, and this one's for you.